Patrick Findaro here, co-founder at Vetted Biz. Excited to have on Neel Parekh, founder of MaidThis. Neel, thanks so much for joining today.
Glad to be here, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
So I want to dive into your franchise model as it's pretty unique and how you grew it, even though you were not operating in the local market for that first corporate location. We'll dive into that, but I'd love to hear, how you went from being in finance, working in private equity to running a Maid Business.
Yeah, it's the normal transition, right? Private equity cleaning company. So I started in private equity out of university in Los Angeles. So I was working kind of the corporate grind, long hours per week in a cubicle, doing Excel spreadsheets, all that kind of good stuff. And I wanted to escape the rat race. So I was literally there typing, how to escape the rat race? How do I start my own side business? And I tried a bunch of stuff. E-commerce drop shipping. I think the first thing I tried was like a pet hair vacuum affiliate website, something. Everything flopped, right? So I was on Reddit one day when I was supposed to be working. And Patrick, do you go on Reddit ever?
I do. I use it more and more. And it's like, great. It takes some time to navigate, but there's some great nuggets there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was on Reddit and it came up across the post of a guy who started a cleaning company. I thought, what the heck, I'm trying all these other things. Let me try it as well. And it started working. In hindsight, now I realize the reason it worked is because I'm going against a very unsophisticated audience in terms of marketing. But because it started working, started getting more and more customers inquire, and then started to get customers calling and saying, hey, can you do Airbnb cleaning? This was back in 2014, 2015, when the Airbnbs and short-term rentals really started to come alive. So then we decided to pivot and also do short-term rentals as well as residential cleaning, and that kind of just exploded. So I started it mainly because I wanted to quit and travel and also help support my parents financially. They had video rental stores at the time. Do you remember like old school Blockbusters?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So a couple of those, obviously mid-2010s, not doing that well. So it was a nice way to have remote work, not just for myself, but for my parents as well. That was inspiration.
Very cool. Yeah. If family won't motivate you, I don't know what else will.
Right.
And Neel, I understand you were in LA, but you also, for some time, like years on end, you were traveling pretty extensively around the world.
I was. So around 2015, I started in 2013. 2015, I think we were doing around 30 to 35,000 in revenue per month at that time, and I was doing it as a side hustle. I decided to finally quit my job, and I'd booked a one-way flight to South America, to Colombia, and started traveling. And I was just had a travel itch. I wanted to go backpack, and I thought I'd backpack and travel for a year, and that became 7 years. So I kind of just kept going. But when I started traveling, I realized this business actually can be done remotely. A lot of things I was doing locally didn't really need to be done remotely with how fast technology has advanced. So once I realized that, I got the business systemized really well. Just because I wasn't there, I couldn't go check things. I couldn't meet people in person. I had to do things in a very systematic way. So I think that forced us to evolve quickly. And because I pretty much stress test all the systems while I was traveling because I couldn't be there, we evolved in a way to be fully remote. So now the internal team for operations for my LA location, we're across, I think, 7 different countries. Everything is done completely remotely. Cleaners go straight from their home to the job sites. Calls get routed to my team in South Africa. Some of them get routed to my team in Honduras. It's just kind of completely global. But yeah, I traveled for about 7 years, just kind of bouncing around before coming back to Los Angeles.
Very cool. Yeah, when you're in Miami visiting your new franchisee there, we got to sit down over lunch or some drinks and exchange travel stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me, the initial, you're making 30, 40, 50K a year or a month rather, in terms of revenue. What were the margins looking like on your business then?
In this type of business model, as you scale, and I should say, as you scale properly, because I think the way I was doing it was not correct, which is now what I help teach franchisees. But as you scale this type of business model, the best thing is to put most of the money up front to growth, because this is a recurring revenue business model. So let's say in year 1, you probably don't want to take out too much profit, in my opinion, because you want to invest that money to get more and more recurring revenue. Over time, that amount will decrease of how much you have to spend in the marketing, and margins increase after that. So most businesses in this area will have between 15 to 25% margins, just depending on where in your business growth you are. But that's pretty normal for the cleaning industry.
And why focus just on Airbnb? I know there was that inbound request and you were studying the market, but that seems like you've really cemented yourselves as the short-term housing cleaner.
Yeah. So we do both still. So residential as well as Airbnb, although Airbnb, VRBO, short-term rentals, that takes up the majority of the revenue. And what I realized is that the volume for short-term rentals is so much higher, right? Let's say, Patrick, you're getting your home cleaned. You're going to get cleaned maybe 2 times a month, maybe 4 times if you really want. Airbnb turnovers, these happen potentially every 3 days. So on average, you're going to have maybe 8 to 10 cleanings per property per month. And these hosts as well, they want a company that's tech enabled. They don't want to have to chase the cleaner. They don't want to have to worry if the cleaner's going to show up or not. So if you present them with a tech enabled angle with it, and it's high volume, it's incredibly sticky, fast growth, and that's what we experienced. We're the first and only vacation rental cleaning franchise that exists, period. So we started it and figured out, wow, this grows really, really fast. So decided to do both residential as well as Airbnb. I think it's such a huge untapped market. It's going to keep growing. I think vacation rental industry overall is growing at, I believe, at like an 8% clip year over year in the US.
That compounds.
Yeah, definitely. We're just riding the wave.
Very cool. And why go the franchise path instead of corporate? Because I imagine you left your job already with a very nice like side business, and I'm sure you could just keep growing the corporate location in LA and then expand into some other markets.
Yeah, it's a good question. And we did expand to San Francisco as well. So a couple corporate locations. After that, I realized there's just so much greenfield opportunity. We were getting calls from property managers who said, hey, we have LA homes as well, but we're also in Phoenix. We're also in Orlando. Can you cover those? And we said, no, we can't cover those. It's a little bit too far. And I actually considered going and setting up shop there. But then I realized there's so much greenfield in the US, especially around short-term rentals and vacation rentals. There's no way we could tackle all of it, right? Every potential market has people who need cleanings done, short-term rentals or residential, and there's just so many markets we don't even know about. So that's when I realized franchising is probably the move, especially because we had the business very systemized, fully remote. So anyone from anywhere can actually manage it. And the fact that there's just so much demand everywhere that we wanted to capture quickly. So franchising made the most sense, that perspective.
And we were talking a little bit about SEO, but it seems like you guys are already kind of dominating your niches. And as you have more franchisees open up, it's just going to be easier to help drive them leads as you have like a pretty high domain authority site. And it's kind of a virtuous circle where now you could be getting leads in from territories you don't have a franchisee that can provide a service.
100%. That's the benefit that compounds with being in a franchise system in my mind is if the franchisor knows what they're doing with digital marketing, that's so powerful. An example would be we opened up a franchise in Myrtle Beach. And I asked Dan, the franchise owner, hey, do some competitive research on the top ranking companies in your market. And he did competitive research. And one of the companies was You've Got Maids, which is a franchise company. Now, that location was ranked top for one of the major keywords there, but they shut down 2 years before that. But their website was still ranked top in that market. And that's because franchise websites in general, there's so much power because there's so many cities that they often rank much faster than just a regular brand new website. So that's one small benefit of being in a franchise system.
You can't even get in the SEO game. If you're a brand new website, good luck. It's going to take 2 to 3 years until you pop up. And that way, during that time, you're blowing money on ads, which keeps getting more expensive. And I know you talked about that on your most recent podcast episode.
Yeah, you said it perfectly, Patrick, which is just time collapsing, right? Let's say you can get your new website ranked, but it's going to take you 2 to 3 years. But if you're in a franchise system, you can get it ranked faster in 1 year. How much more money is that for you, the franchisee? That's a lot more money that you don't have to invest in paid ads or other means or back into SEO before you can get ranked. So there's 1,000 of those little compound effects of being in a large system, which have a very big effect altogether.
How do you and your team at the franchisor made this kind of divide and conquer with what the franchisee is doing in that local market?
Yeah, I love that question. So we are heavily focused on digital marketing. One thing I realized about this industry, not just short-term rentals, but just the cleaning and home service industry, competitors are pretty unsophisticated when it comes to digital marketing. So if we bring kind of current tactics, which is things that people in the e-commerce game or digital marketing game do today, to the cleaning industry, we're already 3 or 4 years ahead of the time, right? That's how we dominate. We just stay current. So we handle things which I feel are the foundational things for the franchisees. Everything around tech, all the website, the optimization, the pop-ups, email funnels. We handle search engine optimization for them, so getting them ranked on Google. We handle social media posting for the franchisees as well. So a lot of things with the online presence, branding, we just handle. What franchisees are in charge of are a couple of things. One would be digital marketing in terms of buying leads. So if they go on like, Thumbtack, Angie's List, Home Advisor, and someone inquires, they would have to answer and call them and, purchase that lead. Or what I call community marketing, which is more, call it guerrilla marketing in your area, getting involved in the community, building relationships with property managers, things like that. So I very much see it as a divide and conquer type of thing of, we know what we're doing with digital marketing, let us handle that, and you guys can just handle local market specific marketing.
That makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, you're helping basically give, prospective clients on a silver platter to them, but there's a lot of other efforts that they can supplement that and grow the business faster. And those referrals, there's low costs. And if they get tied in with a few property managers that are managing a ton of short-term vacation rentals, I imagine that's just like a very nice renewable revenue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing is, there's so many different ways to market. It's very tough if you're one person trying to do it all, right? Especially if you have other businesses going on. It's very tough to do that. That's why I liked what hopefully many franchisors do, which is divide and conquer the different tactics. The franchisee can focus on whatever they're good at, whatever they like doing, whatever is more community focused. And then the other aspects, franchisor can handle. So absolutely, like you said, there's benefits of both sides. And if you can work together as a team, it goes way further.
And what's your ideal franchise candidate? Like which franchisees, what kind of personas have had the biggest impact thus far with MaidThis?
It's interesting. It's more of a cultural fit than anything. On one of our processes during diligence, we have a slide, which is just a beer mug. And it says, if we can't have a beer with you, we're not going to sell you a franchise. And it could be beer, non-alcoholic beverage. It doesn't matter. But the whole point is that, the whole point is that in business, we want to work with people who we like working with, right? And you could work with anyone. Why not enjoy the people you're working with? And that's really, really what we focus on. If you're a good cultural fit, if we get along with you and you get along with us, that's great. Outside of just that basic personality qualification, I think people who are motivated and hungry to grow their business are best. You have a little bit of tech savviness, know what you're doing. You don't have to know like SEO or online marketing, but know how to work your way around different software systems online. You have the time capacity. This is what we call semi-absentee model in the franchise world, or what I call a side hustle. You could start this, but you need probably at least 20 hours a week to devote to it, right? So people who have the time capacity, have the motivation, have some tech savviness, and have the right personality fit. Those would be the best fits for this.
We talked about that when we first met, because there are some businesses, like even when we started our first business Visa franchise, it didn't make sense for me to work 50 to 60 hours a week until it like really started picking up steam. And then I jumped in full force. Where, you have to be smart about your time. And I'm sure the franchisees you're recruiting, they have a pretty good level of income or income potential. So they have to be mindful about how they spend their time and allocating, 20 hours a week for MaidThis. But then as the business grows, it makes more sense to allocate more time or to keep it, I guess, as a semi-absentee opportunity.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. Most of our franchisees actually have a full-time day job. The thing is, almost all of them work from home and hours are flexible. I think it's very tough if you have a very demanding day job and also trying to run this on the side, and you also have a family, it eats up a lot of time. But the ones who have kind of a flexible schedule, they could use their day job almost as seed money to grow the business and get the business to a certain size. And then their goal is to quit that job and go to MaidThis full time. And like you said, Patrick, it takes some time to get there, right? Maybe they want the security. And with our model, that's fine. You can work part-time, keep your day job, grow the business. And when you feel comfortable, jump and go into MaidThis full time. But there will be a certain point where it's busy enough and you're making enough money where it does make sense to make the jump and go over and do the franchising full time.
And what would you say, 1 to 2 years where, for your standard franchisee, it makes sense to go all in on the business?
I believe it would be more around risk tolerance. Now, within a year, you'll be able to see the traction and you probably have invested a lot more into the business to see it grow. But that might mean you don't have exact profit to replace your day job. But many people, as long as they see the growth and they see where it's going, that's fine. Right? They know it's going to grow and they're going to know the next year it's going to double or whatever they're seeing. they might feel more comfortable within a year to take that plunge. Some people want to fully replace their day job income before going full time. So I'd probably say it just depends on what amount of income you need per month, or if you're comfortable just seeing the growth and trajectory before you make that plunge.
Are there, I guess, setting a preface for the question, like we've seen clients invest in real estate related businesses, whether it's property management, and some investors will kind of fast track that initial stage by buying a portfolio of residential contracts, whether it's 100 homes or for vacation rentals, last 10, 20, 30 vacation rental contracts. Do you see as a potential for your franchisees to grow through kind of fast track the process through acquiring an existing book of business?
I would love to see that, yeah. And I think it's 100% possible, especially with the cleaning industry. When you're at a much smaller scale, I think the multiples you're going to be able to buy businesses at is very low. What that means, it's pretty cheap to buy contracts from other businesses. No one has done that yet in our franchise system. I think it's a very viable method of going about. If you could contact the right companies, figure out who to contact at those companies and ask them to buy and pretty much convert to MaidThis, totally doable. You're going to get them at pretty good multiples, and you could just roll it up into your current system and be profitable from day one.
And I imagine that could be an interesting path to explore for those that maybe were laid off from their job, and they need to be doing this full time, and they don't have the luxury to have that extra income coming in.
It's funny because Patrick, I'm sure you and I have been seeing the news of like Facebook has laid off 12,000 people, exactly. Google has laid off 100,000 people. In my mind, all I can think about is I want to target these people to tell them, hey, go buy a cleaning company, come join MaidThis.
And Neel, tell me a little bit about the employee structure. Are they 1099s? Are they W-2s? Does it vary by state? What's it look like, for the franchisee in those first few years?
Varies by state. You could pick the employee model or the contractor model. In both ways, it is still remote. So cleaners are still going to go from their home to the job site. A lot of it is just classification on the back end and some things around control and how you treat them and train them. So every franchisee gets to pick according to their local market labor laws. Most franchisees right now are on the 1099 model. So all independent contractors.
And if you don't mind talking a little bit about your Los Angeles and San Fran locations, like how many employees do you have across those?
Yeah, so we use the 1099 model in California as well. And with the 1099 model in, let's say, Los Angeles, we have around, I believe, between 20 to 25 cleaners. Some of them are single cleaners, some of them are part-time, some of them work in pairs. So it varies of how many people that actually is and how many hours they're available to work, but around 20 to 25.
And how do you source the cleaners?
We, a variety of ways. And we teach the franchisees the exact funnel to follow, which we call the 5-step cleaner recruitment process. Heavy online marketing could be on Indeed, Craigslist, Facebook groups, wherever. You find the cleaners and then you do interview 1, and we teach you what to ask them to identify red flags. Go to interview 2, which is a video interview, teach you how to identify red flags there and move them along the funnel. But that's something where it's constant. No one stops recruiting because there's never enough good cleaners that you could have on staff. So why not just keep recruiting? That's definitely a big focus of our training sessions.
And, there are a lot of cleaning franchises, less so on the residential and definitely not on your vacation niche. I think you're the only one I've heard of doing short terms and focusing on that. But there are a lot on the commercial cleaning space. Is that a segment of the market that you're thinking about jumping into and entering into your franchisees, or is it just not growing? Is it not enticing enough?
Good question. We're actually not focused on commercial at all. That's a different ballgame. We focus on residential or vacation rental. And there's enough greenfield opportunity in just those two niches where that's the only thing we want to focus on. And we did it on the purpose. I've tried commercial before, completely different business model. You need different types of cleaners, more janitorial focused cleaners, which is different skill set, oftentimes different equipment. If you're going in office spaces after hours, that's different types of insurance, different types of liability, different set of cleaners because that's in the night hours. So pretty much every franchise when they join says, hey, can we do commercial? And I say, you could try it. You're going to very quickly realize that's 100% different business model.
And it seems like it's also pretty competitive.
Yeah, very competitive. High amount of recurring revenue in commercial, but also lower margins from what I have seen. Definitely competitive.
You mentioned some hot regions right now on our interview and also before the call, but what areas of the US are you most excited on getting franchisees in?
So 30% of the nation's vacation rentals for all of the US are in Florida. 30%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Florida is by far the hottest market as it relates to short-term rentals, but also even on the residential side, I think a lot of people are moving to Florida. Demographic shifts there are going really well. And we have 3 franchisees there right now. And I anticipate that's going to be the hottest area of growth for our brand. So Florida, the Carolinas oddly have been very, have seen a lot of explosion. So we have 2 current franchisees in North Carolina, possibly another one coming up as well, one in South Carolina, and Texas has also been an area of focus for us. So those have been the different regions, but definitely Florida has been by far the most.
And you mentioned, I mean, Florida doesn't have as much seasonality. Like September and October are very slow, especially, in the hospitality space, where restaurants are hit hard during those months. But Myrtle Beach definitely has seasonality.
Correct.
How do your franchisees kind of combat that? And for the months that there's just not as much cleanings that are requested.
Yeah, that's why we focus a lot on residential as well. So Airbnbs are fantastic and a high amount of recurring revenue. But if people aren't traveling there and there's no cleanings, there's no cleanings. There's not much you can do if travelers aren't going there. So luckily, the residential side kind of carries them over. So I'll give you the example from Myrtle Beach. We know that November through February is going to be slow. Right? We just know it. You can't spend your way out of a seasonal slump. So you go into cost saving mode, revamping, getting new cleaners on board, making sure your current customers are happy. And come March, which is coming up, he's going to hit a high season again through September. So that's when we teach, hey, February, you need to be recruiting aggressively to be able to hit the demand coming up in the summer months. So that's how you take on seasonality. Unfortunately, there's not many tricks you could do if the demographics and population growth is different in those third months.
What are some ways to retain those contractors that are so vital to the company?
Match them with residential cleanings. Yep. So a lot of them are going to be looking for work, and we are pretty good with digital marketing. So we'll probably be one of the top ranked companies in that city for whatever search term. So residential cleanings are going to come. You keep them busy as you can with residential cleanings. So that's why we focus on both and not just the one.
How do you ensure that the contractor doesn't go rogue and just starts working with the Airbnb host directly or for the residential cleanings, the owner of the property?
It's a good question. The honest answer is there's only so much you can do, but it's going to happen no matter what. Now, on the residential side, I would be a little bit more worried about that because they're actually working with the homeowner directly. On the Airbnb and short-term rental side, not much. And here's why. Those homeowners have come from working with an individual cleaner, and they're coming to us for a reason. The reason is because they want to automate it. They don't want to deal with it. If a cleaner calls out, they don't want to scramble to find another cleaner. They just want things automated. So most times the cleaner doesn't have interaction with the homeowner because it's empty. It's in between guests. No one's really there. So it's pretty rare to see it happen on the vacation rental side, but it definitely has happened before on the residential side.
That makes sense. So, I mean, essentially you're a staffing and services business, and part of your huge value add is that MaidThis has it covered, and it's not based on just that one contractor, but you're going to come up with a solution no matter what. Yeah.
Our guarantee is never a no-show guarantee. So if you're an Airbnb host, their biggest worry is that the cleaner is going to no-show. And the demographic and oftentimes cleaners or anyone in the blue collar industry can be somewhat unreliable. So the biggest worry for host is, oh my God, is my cleaner going to show up, or is the next guest going to show up to a dirty home, which is bad review, bad business. So we offer that guarantee to homeowners and say, hey, you never have to worry about a no-show. And that helps with closing the sale as well.
I mean, do any of your competitors offer that?
Nope. Because there are no competitors in terms of franchise vacation rentals. So no one offers that.
Yeah, I guess you're just in such a new space that they don't have a basis to compare it with. And if people are trying to, I guess, move into the short-term vacation rental space, they're not going to know as much, the customer and what they're demanding.
Yeah. And look, in every given market, there probably will be cleaning companies who do short-term rentals. So you're definitely going to find it. You won't find franchises for the most part, which offer vacation rental cleaning. So you will have competitors for it, but these are just typically smaller, purely regional competitors in terms of Airbnb turnovers.
And then what are we talking about, like total investment costs to open up a MaidThis, including working capital needs?
Yeah, so the initial fee or the range is between $47,000 to $67,000. So what's called a low-cost franchise. That includes that initial fee as well. The initial fee currently is $35,000. That will probably be going up by a little bit soon, but that's the initial fee. And most of the money afterwards goes mostly to marketing. So it's a pretty lean model once you get started. We put you through 8 weeks of MaidThis University training. After that, you actually get launched and there's a whole support system there for you. And if you think about it, you don't need vehicles, you don't need wraps, you don't need office spaces, you don't need supplies. What that means is your overhead is relatively low. So even in times like, let's say, coming recession, your costs are pretty variable, right? You don't have a ton of fixed overhead per month, meaning you can kind of weather the storm a lot more. And that also makes operating the business pretty cheap. So 47,000 to 67,000 is kind of the range we tell franchisees. It just depends on how much you're going to spend on, like, if you don't have a laptop yet, you might go to the higher range just to buy a laptop. But most people end up kind of on the lower range because they have a lot of the equipment needed already to get going.
And then in terms of territory, you mentioned Florida is where, there's the largest concentration of short-term rentals. How do you carve out the state of Florida? How do you go about that?
So most cleaning franchises give territories around like 49,000 households. And then you probably have to buy a certain number of households more on every household you pay 60 cents. We just get pretty fat territories to begin with. Our territories are 150 to 250,000 households per franchise. There's a lot of room to grow. I don't want franchisees stepping on each other's toes at all. So we don't oversell a territory. There's a lot of hunting room for everyone, but we carve it up based off the households.
Okay. So is Kissimmee, Florida sold yet? Someone could just be walking in 100,000, 150,000 households, but there's, 20,000 vacation rentals there.
We have a lot of interest there. Kissimmee is insane. I drove through there one time, and like there's entire plazas which are only short-term rentals. Like, I don't need to understand what's going on over here. There's Disneyland, everything. It's so
the whole
interesting
area of Central Florida. You have communities, and they're very nice and reasonably priced. And it's just like townhome upon townhome of just short-term rentals, or even single-family homes that are clustered together. Yeah,
I get this in Orlando, which includes Kissimmee. There's 80,000 vacation rentals there. To put in perspective, LA has 15,000, and there's 80,000 in Orlando. So it's pretty wild.
Neel, you produce a lot of content on being an entrepreneur, intersection between remote work, the home services space, and there's all sorts of prospective franchisees, and franchisors that are listening to us. Do you have any advice for those that are looking to go to entrepreneurship?
Absolutely. My advice for anyone looking to get into entrepreneurship through franchising would be to figure out what your end goal is. And I know many people have probably heard that before, but a lot of times the franchise you pick will align with your end goal. If your end goal is to have a certain type of lifestyle or to make a certain amount of money, there's different systems which are going to be better suited towards that. But honestly, most of the learning happens when you're actually in there. I remember back when I started, I was reading so many forums, doing so much research, watching so many YouTube videos to figure out what business to start. And I felt like I was being really productive. But the reality is I was in analysis paralysis. I was doing so much research. I wasn't taking any action. And I think a lot of people fall into that. They're probably watching this YouTube video in addition to many others, and they're just waiting to take the dive. Things happen when you start moving. You don't know what opportunities there are until you get into it. My favorite phrase is you can't steer a parked car. So my advice would be find something which is suitable enough for you, start diving in, learn a ton, and kind of keep going from there.
Very well said. And, MaidThis is an awesome opportunity for kind of getting your feet wet in entrepreneurship. But if someone doesn't go with MaidThis, what are some lessons you learned from like diving into all these kind of side opportunities, e-commerce type businesses that you could maybe save time for others?
So when I started out, I was making a ton of mistakes because I was trying to figure everything out myself, right? An example would be I had my first cleaner back in 2013 who wanted to get paid after a job. I was working corporate. So I just said, okay, why don't you just pull up in front of my corporate building, went to ATM, got cash, handed them in the car. Of course, everyone saw me from the building, so everyone just thought I was doing drug deals constantly on my lunch break every single day, right? So things like that you could avoid if you just hire a coach, hire someone to tell you what to do. A lot of these lessons I could have time collapsed my learning curve, avoided a lot of early mistakes. So I think in terms of what business model you pick, it's a little bit irrelevant. Find something which suits the type of business you want, suits a lifestyle you want, and a lot of things in your goals, and a lot of things work. But try not to just reinvent the wheel yourself, right? There's people who've already done this, so you can pay for their expertise. And I know it sounds like, hey, you're paying money up front, and you don't want to shell out that money. But the reality is, if you believe in yourself, you're going to win that back much faster and make a lot more money and grow much faster. And time is really what we want. So pay for expertise. That's what I do now. I constantly have coaches, constantly would join systems, which allowed me to grow faster. So that'd be one thing I'd recommend.
Neel, thanks so much. How can people reach out to you, connect with you about MaidThis or all the different insights that you provide? What's the best way, social media, or what's the best route for those to follow you and get in contact about MaidThis?
If you're interested in MaidThis, go to maidthisfranchise.com. That's MaidThis franchise.com. On social media, I'm pretty active on my personal account, which is Neel B. Parekh. And I also have a podcast I host called the Remote Local Podcast. You can check that out as well.
Neel, we'll definitely include links so people can listen to the podcast, those that want to reach out to inquire more about MaidThis, as well as just follow you on Twitter. I don't know, you have how many subscribers on Twitter? It's in the thousands, tens of thousands.
Yeah, I think I just reached the 10K mark. So right around there.
That's awesome. Well, Neel, thanks again. It was awesome to have you on.
Thanks so much, Patrick.